Welcome back to our channel. Before we begin, tell us where in the world are you watching from today? We'd love to know. Now, get comfortable, take a deep breath, and let's dive into today's gripping story. I never needed an alarm clock anymore. My eyes opened on their own, sharp and uninvited, at exactly 6 o'clock that morning. Not because I wanted to start the day early, but because at my age, sleep had become light, fragile, and quick to slip away. 65 years of living had taught me to accept that the deep, uninterrupted nights of youth were long gone, just another memory tucked away with so many others. I stayed under the covers for a few minutes, staring at the ceiling, letting my thoughts gather like the morning mist outside. My joints ached with their usual stiffness, so I eased myself carefully to a sitting position, feet touching the cool floor. My bed, my room, my apartment, though some days it didn't quite feel like mine anymore. Through the half-open blinds, the faint light of dawn crept in. Outside, Hayward was slowly waking up. The quiet streets of Southgate, my neighborhood, for nearly all my life still looked sleepy under a soft morning haze. From here, I could just make out a stretch of highway in the distance, where the first cars began their slow crawl toward Oakland and San Francisco. For 32 years, my Edward had been one of those drivers every morning without fail. Then, one day he was gone, and everything shifted in ways I hadn't been prepared for. I pulled on my robe, tying it loosely, and stepped out into the hallway. The apartment was roomy, 3 full bedrooms and almost 120 square meters. Edward and I had bought it back in the late 80s, when California housing prices didn't feel like some kind of cruel joke. Later, we'd added a second floor and built a patio, dreaming of summer dinners and family barbecues. Back then, the house had been our pride. Now it often felt like a battlefield, and I was always on the losing side. The kitchen, at least, was still my territory. The counters were spotless, just as I had left them last night. Old habits from my years as an A nurse had stuck with me. Everything clean, everything in its place. Order was my quiet rebellion against the chaos that had crept into my life. I filled the kettle and reached for my small wooden tea box, the only indulgence I still allowed myself. I bought the tea from a tiny shop near my old workplace, its smell reminding me of calmer days. Darla, my daughter-in-law, wrinkled her nose at tea. She preferred coffee from those expensive capsules, and she made sure I knew it. Water heated, I began whisking together the batter for pancakes. My son Terence had loved them since he was a boy. And even now, despite everything, I made them every Saturday without fail. A tradition is a fragile thing. Once you stop, it disappears forever. This one was my thread back to when we'd been a real family. The back door of the apartment creaked, and in shuffled Oliver, my youngest grandson. 14 years old, already taller than me, but still all awkward limbs and angles. His dark hair stuck out in every direction, long bangs nearly hiding the eyes that were always glued to his tablet or computer screen. His headphones hung loosely around his neck. "Good morning, Oliver," I greeted, smiling. "Pancakes will be ready in about 15 minutes. He gave a short nod, didn't bother removing his headphones, and sat at the table, tablet already in his hands. I stopped taking it personally a long time ago. At least he wasn't openly hostile like his older sister. And in truth, I suspected. Oliver noticed more than he let on. He understood the undercurrents in this apartment better than anyone. The kitchen door swung open again. "Mum, have you seen my blue sweater?" Rachel breezed in, already dressed and with makeup perfectly in place, though the sun was barely up. 17, she was a mirror of her mother-high cheekbones, sleek chestnut hair, and that same air of impatience. The only thing she'd inherited from her father was his warm brown eyes, the same ones I'd fallen for in Edward all those years ago. I washed it yesterday, dear. Should be on the second shelf in your closet, I told her. I already looked. There, she said sharply, then softened a moment later. Sorry, Grandma. I'm just running late for a project group meeting. A meeting? On Saturday morning? I asked, flipping a pancake. Veterinary classes, remember? We're doing a project on treating stray animals. I nodded. Becoming a vet had been her dream ever since Edward gave her a book on wild animals. For her 10th birthday, check the laundry basket in the bathroom. I may have forgotten to hang it up. Sure enough, she returned with the sweater in hand, planting a quick kiss on my cheek before snatching a pancake straight from the pan. Thanks, Grandma. You're the best. Marlene. The sharp voice made me jump. Darla stood in the doorway, hands on her hips, eyes already narrowed. She never called me Mom or even Mrs. Summers, just Marlene, like we were colleagues at the same level. She was dressed, as always, like she was headed to an interview at a high-end firm pressed. Slacks, crisp blouse, hair in a tight bun. Did you move my things in the bathroom again? I can't find my hand cream, the one Terrence gave me for our anniversary. I just wiped down the shelves, Darla. Everything's where you left it, I said, keeping my tone neutral. Always keep it in the right drawer, she pressed on. Oliver snorted under his breath, his eyes fixed on his tablet. Rachel, heading out the door, called back, Mom, I saw it on your knitstand. Without another word, Darla disappeared, returning moments later with the cream in her hand. It was on the knitstand, just like Rachel said. Next time, Marlene, don't touch my things. Everyone needs their personal space. Personal space. The irony stung, but I only nodded. I placed the finished pancakes on a plate, setting maple syrup beside them, another tradition Edward had insisted on. Terrence wandered in just then, looking tired and slightly rumpled, but to me, still the boy I'd once held in my arms. Morning, Mom, he yawned. Pancakes, you're a miracle. I poured him coffee, smiling faintly. Your father always said a Saturday without pancakes wasn't a Saturday. He didn't look up. He never liked me bringing Edward into the conversation. Darla, already helping herself to yogurt, broke in. By the way, I noticed you used my shampoo again. French one. I've asked you not to. It's expensive. I hadn't touched her shampoo. I had my own plain bottle from the supermarket, but there was no point in arguing. I'm sorry, Darla. It won't happen again. She nodded in that way of hers, accepting my words like they were from an employee, and sat down with Terrence. They began talking about their evening plans without acknowledging me. I finished my tea and excused myself, glad for the chance to retreat to my room. Passing Oliver's door, I saw him at his computer, headphones on, his thin shoulders tense. As he played, Oliver, want to go for a walk later? The weather's nice. I can't, Grandma. Tournament. Can't let my team down. I smiled, though inside I missed the days when he and I had gone to the park together. In my room, I pulled out an old photo album. Edward in his youth, our wedding, Terrence as a baby, Rachel and Oliver as children. Smiles in every frame. Who could have guessed a heart attack would steal Edward away so suddenly? After his death, I worked another 2 years before retiring. Then one call from Terrence. Mom, we need time to get back on our feet. Just for a year. I agreed instantly. He was my only son. They sold their house, paid off debts I later discovered came from Terrence's sports betting, and moved in. And just like that, my home became something else entirely. Terrence got a job as an operator at an auto parts factory with a significant pay cut. Darla continued to work as an administrator at the laundromat. They only had enough money for the bare necessities and their children's education. I didn't ask them to pay for housing, only for my share of the utilities. But gradually everything began to change. Darla started bossing me around in the kitchen, rearranging furniture and commenting on my habits. Terence kept quiet and tried not to get involved. At first, I tried to delicately defend my boundaries, but each time it ended in a silent cold war that hurt the children. And I began to give in on small things, on insignificant things, and then on more serious things. I hid the album back in the knit stand when I heard a knock on the door. It was Rachel. She had come home from class earlier than I expected. Mom, can I come in? Of course, sweetie. She slipped inside and closed the door, pinned her. She looked around as if checking that we were alone and sat down next to me on the bed. I wanted to apologize for Mom, she said quietly, for what she said this morning about the shampoo and everything. It's okay, sweetie. Don't worry about it. But it's not right. Anger flashed in her eyes. This is your house and she acts like you're. She trailed off. Like I'm a guest who's taking advantage of your hospitality. I suggested gently. Rachel nodded, biting her lip. I talked to Dad, but he just brushes it off. He says everything's fine. That you like taking care of us. I sighed. Terence had always been a master of self-deception. You know, I took my granddaughter's hand. Sometimes it's easier for people to ignore problems than to deal with them. Your dad, he's a good man, Rachel. He's just afraid of conflict. Just like you. She looked me straight in the eye. Grandma, why do you let them treat you like that? It's your apartment. You could what? Kick you all out? I shook my head. You're my family. You're all I have left. Rachel hugged me, pressing her cheek against my shoulder. You know, I've been writing down your stories, she said unexpectedly. The ones you told me about. Your work in the ambulance. About the difficult calls, the lives you saved. You were so brave. But what happened to that woman? I didn't know how to respond. Where was the Marlene Riss who had no hesitation about rushing into burning buildings? Who could make difficult decisions in seconds that determined people's lives? Who wasn't afraid to put arrogant doctors in their place when she was right? Who wore her uniform with pride and knew her own worth? She's still here, I said, touching my chest. Just a little tired. Rachel nodded understandingly and stood up. I have to finish my project, but I wanted you to know that Oliver and I are on your side always. When she left, I sat motionless for a long time, staring out the window. Behind it, Hayward continued to live its life. An ordinary American town where ordinary families with ordinary problems lived in ordinary houses. There was another knock at the door, this time louder. Marlene, it was Darla. I want to wish the curtains in the living room. Can you help me take them down? I took a deep breath, preparing to leave my refuge and return to reality, where I was not the mistress of the house, but a servant in my own home. Of course, Darla, I'm on my way. You know, Marlene, sometimes I don't understand how you can stand it. Lauren Falls stirred vigorously at the sugar in her coffee, even though it had long since dissolved. We were sitting in our favorite cafe, the Bluebird, an unremarkable place 2 blocks from the city library where Lauren had worked as a librarian for the past 27 years. I lowered my eyes, staring at my tea. Unlike at home, it was weak. But at least Lauren was here, the only person I could talk to openly. It's not that bad. I tried to smile, but it came out unconvincing. Stop it. Lauren narrowed her eyes. At 63, she was as straightforward as she had been when we met in high school. You're letting them walk all over you in your own home. I sighed, admitting defeat. Lauren always saw right through me. What am I supposed to do? Kick them out? They're my family. Families don't treat each other like that, she said, setting her cup down on the table with such force that a few drops of coffee splashed onto the saucer. Listen, Marlene, I've known you for 50 years. Where is the woman who stood up to a drunk bully twice her size for hurting his girlfriend? I smiled involuntarily, remembering the incident. I was 19. Lauren and I were coming back from a dance, and in their parking lot, we saw a big guy pushing a crying girl around. Without thinking, I stepped between them. That was a long time ago. I shook my head. We were young and stupid. No, it was brave and right. Lauren leaned forward. Do you remember him? You worked in the ambulance. How many lives you saved? How many times you made difficult decisions under pressure? Where is that Marlene? I closed my eyes and memories flooded back. 28 years in ambulance service. First as a paramedic, then as a senior member of the team. Endless calls, sleepless nights. Adrenaline in my blood. And the feeling that I was doing something important. I remembered the accident on the highway when our team had to pull 5 victims out of a wrecked minibus. I remember delivering a baby in an elevator in a skyscraper, when the power went out and I had to use a flashlight to deliver the baby. I remembered the fire in the nursing home where we rescued elderly people, many of whom couldn't walk on their own. In those moments, I never hesitated or doubted myself. I knew what to do and I did it. You were strong. Lauren's voice brought me back to the present. What happened to that woman? She grew old, I smiled bitterly, and she was left alone. Nonsense. Lauren waved her hand. I'm not getting any younger, and my husband died 8 years ago. But I don't let anyone walk all over me, and neither should you. I said nothing, staring out the window at the people passing by. Hayward had changed in recent years, becoming more crowded and noisy. Or maybe it was me who had changed, becoming quieter and more inconspicuous. Tell me what's going on, Lauren said, pushing a plate of lemon pie toward me. And eat. You've lost weight. I obediently picked up my fork, knowing it was useless to argue. Everything's the same as always. Darla bosses everyone around. Terence keeps quiet. They treat everything in the house as if it's theirs, but they constantly criticize me if I touch their things. Darla criticizes me for every little thing. That I didn't wash the dishes properly. That I listened to the radio too loudly. That I ruined her blouse when I washed it. And Terence, what does your son say? Nothing. I shook my head. Or he just brushes it off. Mom, you know Darla. She just likes to be in control, as if that's an excuse. Lauren snorted. And the kids? How are your grandchildren? My face softened. Rachel understands what's going on. Sometimes tries to stand up for me, but she has a hard time with her mother. Oliver, he's withdrawn into his own world. Computer, games, headphones. We used to go for walks and talk a lot. Now he hardly ever leaves his room. This situation is clearly not healthy. Lauren tapped her fingernail on the table. For all of you. You have to do something, Marlene. What exactly? I spread my hands. They've been living with me for 3 years. They don't have money for their own place. If I kick them out, where will they go? You don't have to kick them out, Lauren rolled her eyes. But you need to set boundaries. It's your home and you deserve respect. Remind them of that. I was silent, thinking about her words. Something stirred inside me. The same determination I had once known, but it quickly faded, overwhelmed by the fear of being completely alone. I'll think about it, I finally said. I promise. Lauren snorted skeptically, but changed the subject, starting to talk about the new computer system they were installing at the library and how it was driving all the employees over 40 crazy. I got home around 5 in the evening, loaded down with groceries. Terence usually did the shopping, but today he was working overtime. At least that's what he said. The apartment was unusually quiet. Oliver's door was closed. He was probably playing again. Rachel, judging by the note on the refrigerator, had gone to a friend's house to study for a test and would be back for dinner. Muffled voices came from Terence and Darla's bedroom. I quietly went into the kitchen and started unpacking the groceries. "Are you serious, Terence?" 12,000. Darla's voice rang with anger even through the closed door. "That's all our savings." I froze, listening. I knew it was wrong to eavesdrop, but I couldn't bring myself to move. I was sure the Lakers would win. Terence's voice sounded pathetic. They had a great winning streak. "I don't care about their winning streak." Darla was almost shouting. "We saved that money for a down payment on a house to finally get out of here." I covered my mouth with my hand. $12,000. Terence lost $12,000 gambling. "I'll win it back. I promise." His voice sounded desperate. "I have a system. I just started using it." "A system?" Darla's hysterical laughter rang in my ears. "Your system got us into your mother's house 3 years ago. I thought you'd given it up after last time." "Listen, honey," Terence said more quietly, trying to calm her down. "I'll pay it all back. I've been offered extra shifts at the factory, and I can ask my mom." "No," Darla snapped. "I've had enough of your favors. I'm not going to be even more dependent on your mother." I carefully placed their bag of vegetables on the table, trying not to make any noise. My heart was pounding like crazy. Hurst was down again, and he lied to me again. There was no overtime today. He was probably at some bookmaker's office blowing fellest of the family's savings. The bedroom door flew open, and I barely had time to turn toward the refrigerator, pretending to put the groceries away. Darla flew out of the room, slamming the door so hard that the glass rattled. "Oh, Marlene." She stopped when she saw me. "You're back already." Her eyes were red, either from crying or anger. Her hair was tousled and her cheeks were flushed. I had never seen her so distraught. "I just got home." I smiled as naturally as I could. "I bought everything for dinner. I thought I'd make a tuna casserole. Terence loves it." Darla stared at me for a few seconds as if she didn't understand what I was saying. Then she shook her head. "Do whatever you want," she said. "I'm leaving. Don't wait for me for dinner." She grabbed her bag and jacket from the coat rack in the hallway and rushed out of the apartment, slamming the door behind her. I exhaled slow, only now realizing that I had been holding my breath. Terence came out of the bedroom, pale and with a blank look on his face. He stopped in the kitchen doorway, hesitating to come in. "You heard everything, didn't you?" he asked quietly. I nodded, seeing no point in pretending. 12,000, Terence. My voice trembled. "How could you?" He lowered his eyes, and I saw not a 42-year-old man standing in front of me, but a little boy who had broken Nenny Boar's window with a ball and was afraid to admit it. "I thought I'd get lucky this time," he muttered. "I study at statistics. Calculated everything. Don't do this anymore," I said, reaching out and taking his hand. "Please, Toan, you're destroying yourself and your family." He nodded, still not looking at me. "I know. I'll quit. I promise. This time for sure." We both knew it was a lie. He had promised the same thing after every loss. And yet, he always returned to gambling as soon as he had money. "Go rest," I said, gently pushing him toward the room. "I'll call you when dinner is ready." Left alone, I mechanically continued cooking, but my thoughts were far away. Lauren's words echoed in my head. "You let them walk all over you." And now this. Terence had lost everything, and Darla was furious. I knew from experience that her anger would inevitably spill over onto me. The weakest link in their eyes. Rachel returned around 7, lively and full of energy. "Hi, Mom." She kissed me on their cheek. How was your day? Did you see Lauren? Yes, we had a nice time. I smiled, not wanting to burden her with my problems. How's your test prep going? Great. I think I'm ready. She peeked into the oven. Tuna casserole. Where's Mom? She went out. I shrugged. She said not to wait for her for dinner. Rachel frowned. Did they fight with Dad again? I heard her yelling this morning. I hesitated, not knowing what to say. I didn't want to make Terence look bad in front of his daughter, but I didn't want to lie either. They had a disagreement, I finally said. I think they need some time to cool off. Rachel nodded understandingly. It wasn't the first time her parents had argued. I'll go get Oliver for dinner, she said, and headed for her brother's room. Dinner was spent in tense silence. Terence barely touched his food, although he usually devoured my casserole with gusto. Oliver, as always, was lost in his own thoughts, and Rachel tried to lighten the mood with stories about school, but quickly gave up, sensing the general mood. After dinner, I sent the children to do their homework and started washing the dishes. Terence silently helped Ed clear the table and went to the living room to watch TV, his usual refuge from problems. Darla returned around 10 o'clock in the evening. I had just finished ironing and was about to go to bed. Hearing the front door open, I froze, expecting another outburst of anger. But instead, I heard a woman's laughter. Darla was not alone. Come in, Nancy. My sister-in-law's voice sounded relaxed, even cheerful. Terence is probably already asleep, and the old woman isn't likely to stick her nose out of her room. I stood frozen in the doorway of my bedroom, not daring to come out. The old woman. Was she talking about me? Are you sure? The second female voice sounded uncertain. It's late. I don't want to disturb anyone. Come on, it's my house. Darla dismissed me. I can invite whoever I want, whenever I want. I bit my lip, feeling a wave of indignation rising inside me. Her house. After 3 years of living off me, she considers this apartment hers. How is it living with your husband's mother? NY's voice sounded curious. Isn't it cramped? I heard them go into the kitchen, glasses clinking. Darla must have gotten thawing. It's temporary. Darla's voice sounded confident. We've almost saved. Up for the down payment on our own house. Lies. After Terence's loss today, they had nothing left. But of course, it's not all sunshine and roses, Darla continued, lowering her voice. But I could still hear every word in the silence of the apartment. Marlene sticks her nose everywhere, moves our things around, and constantly lectures the kids, especially Rachel. She's already like a grandmother. I feel for you, Nancy said. My mother-in-law was a real pain in the neck until she moved to Florida. Best decision of her life. They both laughed and I felt a lump rise in my throat. So that's how it was. Was I a pain in the neck to them? A nuisance? The hardest part is pretending to appreciate all her favors, Darla said, clearly making air quotes. Her dinners, her laundry, her cleaning, as if he couldn't manage without her. Why put up with it? NY's voice sounded genuinely puzzled. Why not just move out? Money. Darla sighed. You know how much housing costs in Hayward these days. And since Terence got demoted at work, Shet trailed off. Anyway, we have to put up with the old bag. But it won't be for long. I promise. The old bag. That's how she sees me. That's what I've become in my own home. I quietly closed their bedroom door and sat down on the edge of the bed, feeling my hands tremble. Tears stung my eyes, but I didn't let them fall. Years of working in an ambulance had taught me to hold back my emotions until the right moment. I looked at my hands, wrinkled with protruding veins, but still strong hands that had held newborns and closed the eyes of the dying. Hands that had stitched wounds and set broken bones. Hands that, according to Darla, were now nothing more than a tool for serving her family. You let them walk all over you. Lauren's voice echoed in my head, and for the first time in a long time, I admitted that she was right. I had let it happen. I had become invisible in my own home. An old burden. Something cracked inside me like ice on a river in spring. A thin, barely noticeable crack. But I knew that cracks like that had a tendency to grow. The week after, I overheard the conversation dragged on agonizingly. I tried to act normal. I made breakfast, cleaned the apartment, did the laundry. All the same daily rituals that had long since become second nature to me. But something had changed inside. Darla's words, "old burden," rang in my ears every time I saw my daughter-in-law. Terence was depressed and silent. Darla pointedly ignored him at dinner, talking only to the children. I noticed Rachel and Oliver exchanging worried glances, sensing the growing tension. On Friday evening, I was finishing dusting the living room when I heard the front door slam. Darla had come home from work earlier than usual, and something in her gait and the energetic click of her heels on the parquet floor told me she had news. "Oh, Marlene, you're here," she said, tossing her bag on the sofa and scanning the room with an appraising glance. "Great, we need to talk." I carefully put down the duster and stood up straight. "Something happened, Darla?" "Yes, and something wonderful." She smiled, that special smile that never touched her eyes. "I got a promotion. I know the manager of the laundry chain in our area." "Congratulations," I said sincerely. "That's great news." "Yes, the pay is better, and the career prospects are better," she said, looking around the room as if assessing the situation. "But there's one condition. I have to do some of the work remotely from home. I need a home office. Something stirred inside me, a bad feeling that I immediately tried to suppress. "Maybe we could remodel part of the living room," I suggested. "We could put a desk by the window where the light is good." "No, Marlene," she shook her head. "I need a separate space where no one will disturb me." "I was thinking about your room." I froze, not believing my ears. "My room?" "Yes." She nodded as if it were the most natural suggestion in the world. "It's the brightest and most spacious room after Terren's and mine. And frankly, it's too big for one person, especially with your minimal belongings." "My minimal belongings." For years, I have been getting rid of my things to make room for her junk. I had given her shelves in my closets, drawers in my dressers, space in the storage room, and now she wanted to take away my last bit of personal space. "Where am I going to sleep?" My voice was quiet, almost submissive. "We can convert the storage room," Darla shrugged. "It's small, but there's enough room for a bed and a knitstand. You only sleep there anyway, right?" I felt a wave of anger rising inside me, that years of suppressing my feelings took over. "I need to think about it, Darla," I said evenly. "These are big changes." "Of course, think about it." She smiled condescendingly, as if she were talking to a child. "But I'd like to start rearranging tomorrow. The office furniture will be delivered on Wednesday." She had already ordered it, without even asking me, without discussing it. She just decided that's how it would be. "Have you discussed this with Terence?" I asked, hoping Myson would at least try to stand up for me. "Of course," she dismissed me. "He's all for it. This is our chance to finally get back on our feet after recent events." Recent events. That's what she called Terren's $12,000 loss. "I'll talk to him," I said, feeling a strange calmness growing inside me. Not humility, but something else. Something dangerous. "Please," Darla shrugged. "Just don't take too long to decide. I already ordered the paint for the walls. I think light grey will look great." She turned and walked into the kitchen, leaving me standing in the middle of the living room with a dust rag in my hand. My house, my room, my life, and they were going to change it all without my consent. Terence came home from work around 7. I was waiting for him in the kitchen cooking his favorite, roast. Darla had gone to some meeting with her colleagues and the kids were at a friend's house. We were left alone, mother and son, like in the old days when Edward was away on business, and Terence and I would have special evenings with board games and homemade cookies. It smells amazing, Mom, Hesmald as he entered the kitchen, but his smile faded when he saw the look on my face. Is something wrong? Darla told me about her promotion, and I pointed him to a chair. Sit down. Let's talk. He nervously licked his lips, but obeyed. Yes, that's great news. Her salary will almost double, and she wants to take my room for her office. I interrupted. Is it true that you agreed? Terence lowered his eyes, and I knew immediately what his answer would be. Mum, it's only temporary, he began to explain. As soon as we save up for the down payment on the house after you lost 12,000. I shook my head. Terence, do you realize you're asking me to move into a storage room? A windowless room the size of a closet. We'll make it comfortable, he said, still not looking at me. We'll put in a nice bed, lamps. It's not about the bed, I sighed. It's about respect. This is my house, Terence. I'm still paying the mortgage on it. I know. He slumped even further. And we're grateful to you for letting us live here. But this is a chance for Darla, for all of us. With a new salary, we can save up for our own place faster. And how long will that take? I looked at my son, trying to seeing him the responsible man Edward, and I had hoped to raise. A year. 2, 5. When was the last time you did something for yourself instead of just going with the flow and indulging Darla? That's not fair. He finally looked up and I saw a flash of hurt in his eyes. I'm trying to provide for my family. Yes, I made a mistake with those bets, but I'm working on it. And Darla's promotion is our chance to make things right by making your mother live in a closet. I shook my head. Terence, this isn't right. And you know it. He was silent, staring at his untouched roast. I could see the struggle on his face. Part of him knew I was right, but another stronger part was afraid to stand up to his wife. I'll talk to Darla, he finally said. Maybe we can work something out. I knew he wouldn't do it, or he would pretend Totup to her, and then tell me that Darla wouldn't agree as always. Okay, I nodded, deciding to give him one last chance to show some backbone. Talk to her. The rest of the evening passed in tense silence. Terence went to the living room to watch TV, and I sat in the kitchen for a long time, going over the possible options in my mind. The storage room was really tiny, about 6 square meters, with no windows and a single light bulb hanging from the ceiling. The prospect of spending the rest of my life there was depressing. But what depressed me most was the thought of having to part with things that wouldn't fit in our new home. Especially the vinyl record collection that Edward and I had spent a lifetime putting together. More than 200 albums from classic jazz to 1960s rock and roll. There would definitely be no room for them in the storage room. The next morning, I woke up to the sound of furniture being moved. Peeking out of my room, I saw Darla and Terence in their living room. They were moving the sofa against the wall to make space. What's going on? I went out to them, wrapping my robe around me. We're getting ready to rearrange the furniture. Darla smiled, but her eyes remained cold. Terence said, You discussed everything yesterday. I looked at my son, who was carefully avoiding my gaze. We talked, I said slowly, but I didn't give my consent. Oh. Darla straightened up and the smile disappeared from her face. I thought it was settled. The office furniture is being delivered on Wednesday, and we wanted to start repainting the room today. I haven't decided yet, Darla. I crossed my arms over my chest. This is a big change. I need time. There's no time. She snapped, I need to start working from home on Monday. If the room isn't ready, I could lose this opportunity. Mum. Terence finally looked at me. Please, this is very important to us. I felt anger rising inside me. They didn't even ask me. They just decided everything for me, confident that I would give in again. I need to think about it, I said firmly. Don't touch anything in my room until I've made a decision. But Darla began. No, I raised my hand, stopping her. It's my room and my house. I have a right to think about this. Without waiting for a response, I went back to my room and closed the door. My heart was pounding. For the first time in a long time, I had openly defied Darla, and it felt liberating. I spent the whole day thinking about the situation. Part of me wanted to give in, as always, for the sake of peace in the family. Another part, the determined Marlene from the past, rebelled against yet another humiliation. By evening, I still hadn't come to a final decision. Around 6 o'clock, there was a knock on my door. Rachel was standing there with a cup of tea. I brought you some chamomile, she said, handing me the cup. Can I come in? I nodded and let her in. I heard what's going on, she said, sitting down on the edge of the bed. It's not fair, Mom. They can't evict you to the storage room. I think they can, I said with a bitter smile, sitting down next to her. And to be honest, I've led them to believe that I'll give in to any argument. But not this time, right? Rachel looked at me hopefully. You won't agree. I sighed, looking at the shelves of records lining the wall. Each one held memories. Edward and me dancing to Frank Sinatra on our first anniversary. Little Terence falling asleep to Ella Fitzgerald LaBeouz. Our family game nights with Beatles records playing in the background. I don't know, I said earnestly. I don't want to cause any trouble. Come on. Rachel took my hand. They're the ones causing trouble, not you. This is your home. At that moment, the door swung open without a knock. Darla stood in the doorway with a tape measure in her hands. Oh, you're here, she said, glancing quickly at us. Rachel, go help your father with the boxes in the living room. What boxes? For your things. Darla entered their room and began measuring the wall. I decided not to waste any time. We'll start packing tomorrow so we can paint the walls on Sunday. I didn't give my consent, Darla. My patience was running out and I asked you not to touch my room. Marlene, she sighed with feigned patience. We can't wait forever. We have to make a decision now. And I've made mine, I said firmly. The answer is no. I'm not moving into the closet. Darla froze with the tape measure in her hands. Rachel held her breath. What do you mean no? Darla slowly turned to me. This is not up for discussion. I need an office and I need my room. I met Herges without looking away. Find another solution. Like what? Darla crossed her arms over her chest. Convert Rachel's room or Oliver's. There. Children. They need space to study. And I don't need space. I felt a wave of indignation rising within me. Am I not a person? You're retired, Darla snapped. What are you going to do in such a big room? Stare at the ceiling? The closet is plenty big enough for you. Rachel gasped at such blunt rudeness. Mum, how can you say that? Mind your own business. Darla shot her daughter an angry look. Go to your father, I said. No. Rachel stood next to me. I'm staying with Grandma. This is her room, and you have no right to kick her out. Terence appeared in the doorway, attracted by the raised voices. What's going on here? He looked from his wife to his daughter and mother. Your mother refuses to move, Darla said dryly. She says she needs this room. For what, I wonder? For this junk? She pointed to the shelves with records. It's not junk. I took a step forward, feeling something break inside me. This is Edward's in my collection. Our life, our memories. Edward's been gone for 5 years. Darla rolled her eyes. It's time to move on. These records are just gathering dust. You could sell them. I think some of them are worth a lot of money. Sell them? I felt the blood drain from my face. You want to sell my records? Why not? Darla shrugged. No one listens to them anyway, and we need the money. You always need money. I shook my head. But not at the expense of my memories. Darla. Terence interjected uncertainly. Maybe we can really find Anna the solution. Mum's records. Oh, God, don't start. Darla interrupted him with a wave of her hand. I thought we had discussed everything. We need this office. It's our chance to finally get out of the debt you got us into. Don't talk like that in front of the children. Terence pulled. What am I supposed to say? Pretend everything is fine. Darla raised her voice. We need money. I need an office, and I'm going to get it even if I have to take all this junk to the dump. She grabbed one of the records from the shelf, a rare Set Baker album that Edward had given me on our last anniversary. No. I lunged forward, trying to grab the record. Don't you dare touch it. Or what? Darla stepped back, holding the record above her head. What are you going to do, Marlene? Kick us out? She laughed. Come on. We all know you're too scared to be alone. You're only still living here because we put up with you. The silence that followed was deafening. I froze, unable to believe my ears. Terence stared at his wife with wide eyes. Rachel pressed her hand to her mouth. What did you say? My voice sounded unrecognizably calm. You heard me. Darla lowered her hand from the record but didn't put it back on the shelf. It's time to face the truth. This is our home now. We live here. We're raising our children here. And you're just an old woman clinging to the past and preventing us from moving forward. Darla. Terence finally found his voice. You're crossing the line. No, she's crossing the line. Darla pointed her finger at me by refusing to give up the room we need. Selfish old enough. I raised my hand, stopping the flow of insults. Something inside me had changed. It was as if a wall had come crashing down, holding back everything I had been feeling for the last few years. You're right about one thing, Darla. It's time to face the truth. I looked around the room. My room in my apartment. The apartment I was still paying for with my modest pension. The apartment where I had allowed my sister-in-law to boss me around, humiliate me, treat me like a servant. This is my home, I said quietly but firmly. My apartment. The one I pay for. The one I let you move into 3 years ago out of pity, because you couldn't afford to rent anywhere after Terence lost all his money gambling. Darla pulled but continued to stare at me defiantly. So what? You can't kick us out. You can't live alone. You're afraid of being alone. You need us more than we need you. That's not true. I shook my head. I managed on my own for 2 years after Edward died. I can manage now. I looked at Terence, who stood pale and confused, not knowing whose side to take. I put up with all this because you are my family, I continued. I thought I was helping you. But I was wrong. He wasn't helping. I was letting you use me. And that ends now. I walked over to Darla and gently but firmly took their cord out of her hands and put it back on the shelf. No one touches my things, I said. No one is taking my room. And if you don't like it, then you'll have to find another place to live. After our argument, an oppressive silence fell over the apartment. Darla shot me a withering glance, went into her bedroom, and slammed the door behind her. Terence stood in the doorway of my room, clearly wanting to say something, but unable to decide what, and simply shrugged and followed his wife. Rachel hugged me tightly and whispered, "I'm proud of you, babe," before going to her room. Even Oliver, who usually never left his room, opened his door a crack and looked at me with a new expression, either surprise or respect. I was left alone, my heart pounding, and my hands shaking, but strangely calm. It was as if I had shed a heavy burden that I had been carrying for years. It was late, around 11 o'clock, but I knew I wouldn't be able to sleep. Instead, I took out an old photo album that I kept in the bottom drawer or dresser and sat down on the bed with it. Leafing through the pages, I immersed myself in memories. Here, we are with Edward, young, smiling, full of hope, standing in front of this free apartment on the day we signed the papers. It was 1987. We were just over 30, and Terence was 5. He was holding our hands, so small with tousled hair and a crooked smile. His front tooth had just fallen out. "Our home," Edward said, putting his arm around Miss Holder's. "We did it, Marlene. Our own home. We worked like crazy to save up for the down payment." Edward worked double shifts at the factory, and I worked nights at the hospital. We savored on everything, ate cheap pasta, bought clothes at thrift stores, gave up vacations, but it was worth it. That feeling when you walk into your home knowing that no one can kick you out is priceless. I turned the page. Here we are fixing up living room. Edward is painting the walls in paint-splattered jeans. I'm washing the windows in a headscarf. And Terence is lugging around small tools with an important look on his face. We did all the renovations ourselves while hiring workers. We saved every dollar. But what fun we had. We turned the music up loud, sang, danced with paintbrushes and mops, took breaks to eat pizza that we ordered despite our frugality. Little celebrations in the midst of our busy work days. The next photo is our housewarming party. Our friends, relatives and colleagues crowd into the living room. Everyone brought gifts. Some brought curtains, some brought pots, some brought flower pots. Lorene, there she is in the corner with a glass of wine, laughing at Samian's joke, gave us the first record for our future collection. Bob Dylan's time Out of Mind. Start with the classics, she said. And so we did. Every month, no matter how tight money was, we bought one new record. It was our ritual. After payday, we would go to the music store and spend a long time choosing, consulting with each other. Jazz, rock, blues, classical. Our collection grew, reflecting our changing tastes and moods. I closed the album and walked over to the record shelves. I ran my fingers along the spines, reading their familiar titles. Each one was a piece of my life with Edward. Our first years in this apartment, Terrence's birth, his growing up, our family holidays, and quiet evenings when we just sat in the living room listening to music and talking about everything under the sun. Edward always said that music was the language of the soul. He loved jazz more than anything, especially Miles Davis and Chad Baker. I was more of a fan of classic rocking folk. Bob Dylan, Simon and Garfunkel, Joni Mitchell. But we found compromises, discovered new things together, created our own musical world. And now Darla wanted to throw it all away or sell it like junk, like useless trash to make room for her office in my house. I went back to the bed and sat down, looking out the window. At Hayward at night, the city lights twinkled in the darkness, reflecting the stars. Edward loved that view. Sometimes in the evenings, We would just stand at the window hugging each other and look at the city. Imagine how many lives, how many stories are unfolding right now behind each of those windows, he would say. What would he say if he could see? What our family had become after his death? What would he advise me to do? I knew the answer. Edward always taught Terence to respect others and take responsibility for his actions. He would not approve of how his son allows his wife to treat me. And he certainly wouldn't have stayed silent if someone tried to evict him from his own bedroom. How did I let things get this far? The thought haunted me, forcing me to relive and analyze the events of the past few years. After Edward's death, I was devastated. A sudden heart attack took him at the age of 64. He didn't even get to retire, didn't see Rachel go to high school, didn't live to see Oliver's birth. It was so unfair, so painful that I felt numb. For the first year, I just existed. Going to work, coming home, going through the motions. Terence and his family visited me every weekend, bringing food, helping with cleaning, keeping me company. I was grateful to them for their support. And then, when Terence lost his job, I didn't hesitate to offer them to move in with me. It seemed like the perfect solution for a variant. They wouldn't have to pay rent and I wouldn't be alone. Plus, I would be able to spend more time with my grandchildren. At first, everything went well. Darla cooked. Terence helped with repairs and heavy housework, and the children filled the apartment with life and laughter. But gradually, almost imperceptibly, the balance of power began to shift. At first, it was little things. Darla rearranged the furniture in the kitchen for convenience, without asking my opinion. Then she started buying foods I never ate, explaining that they were better for me. Then the daily routine began to revolve around their schedule, not mine. And at some point, I realized that I was asking permission to turn on the TV in my own living room. I let them do it. I justified it to myself. They're young. They have their own lives. I don't want to interfere. It's not important. It's just little things for the sake of piecing the family, so as not to be left alone. But now, looking at it from the outside, I realized that I had betrayed myself. And not only myself, I betrayed the memory of Edward, the life we lived, the values we held dear. We would never have allowed anyone to boss us around or set rules in our home. And now Darla wanted to evict me from my own bedroom, sell my and Edward's record collection, and lock me in a windowless closet. And she had the audacity to say that she was putting up with me in my own home. This had to stop. I opened that drawer of my bedside table and took out a folder with documents. The deed to the apartment, the mortgage, the insurance policies. Everything was in my and Edward's names, and after his death, only in mine. Terence and Darla had no legal claim to this property. They were only here because I allowed them to be, and it was time to remind them of that. I decided that in the morning, I would go to the bank and then to Alawia. I needed to know exactly what rights I had and how I could protect them. No more concessions, no more compromises at the expense of my dignity. With that thought, I finally went to bed. And for the first time in a long time, I fell asleep almost immediately without the usual tossing and turning and anxious thoughts. The morning greeted me with bright sunshine and unusual silence. I looked out the window. Terence's car was in the parking lot, which meant they hadn't left. They were probably just avoiding me after yesterday. I quickly got dressed, choosing my best pantsuit, the one I used to wear to important meetings at the hospital. Dark blue, austere, confidence-inspiring. I pulled my hair back into a neat bun and even put on some light makeup. Looking in the mirror, I didn't see a downtrodden grandmother, but a professional. A woman who knew her worth. When I left the room, I found Terence in the kitchen. He was sitting over a cup of coffee, looking as if he hadn't slept all night. "Good morning," I said in a neutral tone. He flinched and looked up at me with tired eyes. "Mom, about yesterday." Darla didn't mean it. She was just on edge. "No excuses, Terence." I poured myself some tea. Darla said exactly what she thinks, and I appreciate her honesty. "Are you going somewhere?" He glanced at my suit. "I have things to do in town," I said, not going into details. "I'll be back for dinner." He nodded, clearly not wanting to continue the conversation. I finished my tea, grabbed my bag, and left the apartment, feeling my resolve grow with every step. My first stop was the bank. My advisor was a young woman named Stephanie, with a professional smile and an attentive gaze. "How can I help you today, Mrs. Hendris?" she asked as we sat down at her desk. "I need some information about my mortgage," I said, taking out a folder of documents. "I want to know how much I have left to pay, and what my rights are as the sole owner of the property." Stephanie typed something into the computer, studying my account. "You have a very good credit history, Mrs. Ricks," she remarked. "You've never missed a payment in." She scrolled down the screen in all 38 years of your mortgage. Impressive. I felt a surge of pride. Edward and I had always been disciplined about our finances, and I had continued that discipline after his death. "Only 3 payments left," Stephanie said. "After that, the apartment will be yours unencumbered. 3 payments. Just 3 months. And the 30-year mortgage we took out with Edward when we were young parents with dreams for the future will be paid off." "What about my rights?" I asked. "Can I evict someone from the apartment?" Stephanie raised her eyebrows slightly. "You are the sole owner according to the documents. That gives you the full right to decide who can live in your property and who cannot." She recommended that I consult a housing lawyer and gave me the contact details of a lawyer she knew who specialized in this area. An hour later, I was sitting in the office of Richard Donovan, an elderly gentleman with grey temples and a penetrating gaze. "So, Mrs. Ricks, let me see if I understand the situation correctly." He looked through the documents I had given him. "Your son and daughter-in-law have been living in your apartment for the past 3 years without a lease, have not paid any rent, and are now trying to limit your rights as the owner." I nodded, feeling a strange sense of relief that someone else had articulated it so clearly. "And yesterday, my daughter-in-law said that you only live there because they tolerate you," I added, "even though it's my apartment and I'm still paying the mortgage." Mr. Donovan shook his head. "I'm afraid this is a classic case of emotional abuse of an elderly person by relatives," he said. "Unfortunately, we encounter such situations more often than I would like." Emotional abuse. Those words hit me like a slap in the face. I had never thought of my situation in those terms, but it was true. Constant humiliation, devaluation of my feelings, disregard for my needs. Isn't that abuse? What are my options? I asked, trying to sound calm. "As the owner, you have every right to evict unwanted tenants," the lawyer explained. "Even if they are your relatives, the law is on your side." He explained the procedure. Formal notice of eviction specifying the date by which they must vacate the premises. If they refuse, you can go to court. But I would recommend starting with a conversation, Mr. Donovan added. Explain the situation to them. Let them know that you know your rights and are prepared to defend them. Often that alone is enough to make P.O. player consider. I nodded, thinking about what he had said. I didn't want to talk Eve matter to court. After all, they were my son and my grandchildren. But I couldn't go on living in such a humiliating situation. What about the children? I asked. My grandchildren are 17 and 14. I don't want them to suffer. That's a difficulties, the lawyer admitted. But legally, they are minors and under the care of their parents. If you evict the parents, the children go with them. That was the hardest part. The thought of not seeing Rachel and Oliver every day was painful. But was the current situation any better? Was it good for them to grow up in a home where their grandmother was humiliated and their parents were constantly fighting? I thanked Mr. Donovan for his advice and left Sisyphus with a plan of action and a sample eviction notice he had helped. Emmy draft. On the way home, I stopped at A Cave to catch my breath and think things over again. I ordered a cup of tea and sat watching the people passing by, each of them immersed in their own lives, their own problems, their own joys. What did I really want? To evict my son and his family, or just to regain my self-respect, my dignity, control over my own life? I didn't find the answer over that cup of tea, but I knew for sure that I couldn't go back to the way things were. When I got home, no one was there but Rachel. She was sitting in the living room with a book, but when she saw me, she put it down and got up. "Mum, I was worried. You never leave for so long without telling me." "I'm sorry, dear." I smiled, touched by her concern. I had some important things to do. I went into the kitchen to prepare dinner, but Rachel followed me. "Grandma," I wanted to talk about yesterday. She looked troubled. What Mom said was awful. I'm so ashamed of her. I put down groceries and turned to my granddaughter. "You don't need to be ashamed of your parents' actions, Rachel." "But I am." She shook her head. "Not just for yesterday, for everything they do to you. It's like you're not a person, just a convenient housekeeper." I could see how hard it was for her to say a 17-year-old girl shouldn't feel that kind of shame for her parents. "I went to a lawyer today," I said, deciding to be honest with her. "I found out my rights as the owner of the apartment." Rachel nodded, not looking surprised. "Are you going to evict them?" "I haven't decided yet," I admitted, "but I won't let them treat me the way they have for the past few years." "You understand," she said quietly, "and I'll support whatever you decide, even if we have to move away." Her words touched me deeply. This young girl showed more maturity and understanding than her parents. "Thank you, dear." He hugged her. "Whatever happens, I'll always be here. For you. You know that, right?" She nodded, pressing herself against me. "I know, and I'll be here for you too." We stood there for a few minutes, finding comfort in each other. Then I pulled away and wiped my eyes. "I'm going to get changed," I said. "Then I'll make dinner." In my room, I sat down on the bed, looking at the shelves of records, the photographs, all the things that made up my life. And I knew that I couldn't let anyone devalue it anymore. I got up and took an old suitcase out of the closet, the one Edward and I hadest for our only vacation together in Hawaii, which we had saved up for our 20th wedding anniversary. I opened it on the bed and began to carefully pack my things. I had made up my mind. I wasn't going to put off the conversation any longer. That evening, when the whole family gathered for dinner, I announced my decision. "I have some news," I sighed as everyone began to eat. "I'm going to spend a week with Lauren." Terence froze with his fork in his hand. Darla looked up and Rachel exchanged a quick glance with Oliver. "To Lauren?" Terence asked. "That's unexpected." "Why?" I continued eating calmly. "We've been planning to spend some time together for a long time. She recently updated her book collection and wants to show me her new editions." That was half true. Lauren and I had indeed discussed that it would be nice to spend a couple of days together, but we hadn't made any specific plans. However, after consulting with my lawyer, I called my friend and told her everything. She immediately offered to let me stay with her. "When are you leaving?" Darla's voice betrayed her poorly concealed irritation. Tomorrow morning," I said, spreading butter on my bread as if I were discussing the most ordinary thing in the world. "Tomorrow," Darla put down her fork. But we have plans for the weekend. Who's going to cook? Who's going to look after the kids? I could barely suppress a smile. Of course, the first thought was who was going to wait on them. They're not babbies. Anymore, Darla, I pointed out. Rachel's 17. Oliver's 14. They can take care of themselves for a few days. And as for cooking, I shrugged. I'm sure you'll do just fine. After all, it's our house, as you recently pointed out. Darla blushed, but said nothing. Clearly not wanting to start another argument in front of the children. Terence looked confused. Are you sure, Mom? Maybe you could reschedule. I'm swamped at work and will be home late. No, Terence. I shook my head. My plans are already set. Lauren is waiting for me, and I want to take a break after everything that's happened recently. There was an awkward pause. Everyone knew what everything she was referring to. Okay, Terence finally said. Of course, Mom. You need a break. Well managed. Rochelle caught my eye across the table and nodded slightly. She understood what was going on and supported me. I can cook, she offered. While you're away, Mom, I know all your recipes. Thank you, dear. I smiled at her. But don't overdo it, you have enough to do. The rest often are passed in tense silence. Darla dug into her plate demonstratively, barely touching her food. Terence looked lost, like a child who had suddenly realized that his parents were not all powerful and would not always bother. Oliver, as usual, quickly finished his meal and asked permission to leave the table to return to his computer games. Only Rachel behaved normally, talking about school news and plans for the weekend. After dinner, I retired to my room to finish packing. I was carefully folding clothes into my suitcase when there was a knock at the door. It was Terence. Can I come in? He shifted uncertainly from foot to foot in the doorway. Of course, I said, gesturing for him to come in. He entered, looked around as if seeing my room for the first time, and sat down on the edge of the bed. Mum, I wanted to apologize, he began. For Darla. For myself, for everything that happened. I continued packing without looking at him. You know, Terence, apologies only matter when they're followed by change. I understand, he said, lowering his head. And I promise everything will change. We'll find another solution with Darla's office. She'll talk to her boss. It's not about the office. I finally turned to him. It's about respect, about understanding boundaries, about realizing that this is my home, and I deserve to be treated like a human being in it. Terence nodded, still not looking up. I know, and I'm to blame. I should have stopped this a long time ago. Yes, you should have. I agreed. But you chose the path of least resistance. As always, he flinched at those words, and I felt a little sorry for him. My son had always been weak-willed, preferring to give in to avoid conflict since he was a child. Edward had tried to teach him to stand up for himself, but apparently it was just a character trait that couldn't be changed. I'll change, he said with unexpected determination. I'll prove to you that I can be different. Okay, I nodded. Wait. He stood up, clearly wanting to say something else, but changed his mind and just hugged me briefly, awkwardly, as he hadn't hugged me in years. Have a good trip, Mum, he said, and left. I closed the door behind him and went back to packing, wondering if he would really keep his promise. Part of me wanted to believe he would, but another, more realistic part of me doubted it. Too many times he had said one thing and done another. Early in the morning, while everyone was still asleep, I finished packing and called a taxi. I left a note in the kitchen reminding them of simple things to water the flowers, feed the fish in the aquarium, and set the dishwasher. The usual household chores that they would surely forget without my reminders. Lauren greeted me with open arms. "Welcome to the Resistance headquarters," she laughed, helping me with my suitcase. "You finally did it, Marlene. I'm proud of you." Her house, a small but cozy cottage in a quiet neighborhood in Hayward, was the complete opposite of my apartment. There were books everywhere, bright pillows, unusual souvenirs from her travels, paintings by local artists. There was no hint of the primness or a strict order that Darla valued so much. "The guest bedroom is yours." Lauren showed me a small but bright room overlooking Negadan. "Make yourself at home. Then we'll have some wine and make plans for revenge." I laughed, feeling the tension of the last few days begin to melt away. "No revenge, just justice." "Boring," she winked. "But I'll support whatever you decide." The week at Lawrence flew by. Went to the movies, to a museum, to a concert in the park. We cooked dinner together, played board games, discussed books. It was as if I had returned to the time when I was just Marlene, a woman with her own interests, opinions and desires. Not a grandmother, not a housekeeper, not a ghost in my own home. Every evening, Rachel called me to tell me how things were going at home. According to her, Darla was furious that I had left, but she was trying not to show it. Terence was spending more time at work than at home, and Oliver, to everyone's surprise, started helping out around the house, washing dishes, taking out the trash, even cooking dinner on Sunday. "He misses you, Grandma," Rachel said, although he'll never admit it. That warmed my heart. I miss my grandchildren too. Despite everything that had happened, they were part of my life, my family. The day before I returned, I met with Mr. Donovan, my lawyer. We discussed the next steps and he handed me the official eviction notice, a document drawn up in accordance with all legal requirements. 30 days, he said. By law, you must give them at least 30 days to move out. If they don't leave within that time, will go to court. I read the document carefully. It was written in dry legal language without emotion. Simply a statement of fact that I, as that property owner, was demanding that the living space be vacated within 30 days. "Are you sure you want to do this?" Mr. Donovan asked, noticing my pensive expression. "It's not too late to change our mind." I shook my head. "No, I'm sure it's necessary." He nodded and shook me hand. "You're a strong woman, Mrs. Ricks. Don't let anyone convince you otherwise." On the day I returned, I felt a strange mixture of anxiety and determination. On the one hand, I knew I was doing the right thing. On the other, I was afraid of the reaction of my son, my daughter-in-law, even my grandchildren. Was I being too cruel? Was I destroying our family for good? A thief reading my mind. Lauren hugged me before I left. "Remember, Marlene," she said, "you're not destroying your family. They did that with their attitude toward you. You're just restoring justice and your dignity." I nodded, grateful for her support, and got into the taxi that would take me home. Rachel opened the door to the apartment. When she saw me, she lit up and rushed to hug me. "Grandma, finally, Dot, we missed you so much." Oliver appeared behind her, still as awkward as ever, with his bangs falling over his eyes, but this time without headphones. "Hi, Mom," he said, and to my surprise, hugged me too, though more reserved than his sister. "I missed you too." I smiled, touched by their reunion. "How did you manage without me?" "We survived." Rachel rolled her eyes. "Mom treated to cook, But let's just say we ordered a lot of takeout. I laughed and walked into the apartment. The first thing I noticed was the mess. It wasn't catastrophic, but it was noticeable. Things were out of place. There was dust on the shelves and there were dirty dishes in the sink. Everything that usually kept tidy without even thinking about it. Are Mom and Dad home? I asked, taking off my coat. Dad's in the living room, Rachel replied. Mum's at work, but she should be back soon. I nodded and headed for the living room. Terence was sitting on the sofa, absent-mindedly, flipping through the TV channels. Hearing my footsteps, he looked up. Mom, he jumped up. You're back. As you can see, I smiled, noticing how tired he looked. How are you? Fine, he shrugged. Did you have a good rest? Wonderful. I sat down in the chair. Opposite him, Lauren says, Hi, we haven't had such a good time in a long time. Terence nodded, clearly not knowing what else to say. An awkward pause ensued. Is Darla still at work? I asked, even though I already knew the answer. Yes, she's working late today. Terence rubbed his neck, a gesture he always made when he was nervous. She's just very busy with her new promotion. I understand, I nodded. When she gets back, we need to talk, all of us. Something in my tone made him tense. About what? About our future, I replied simply. About how we're going to live from now on. Terence lowered his eyes as if he understood where the conversation was going. Okay, Heffenly said. We'll talk when Darla gets back. I nodded and got up. I'm going to unpack and rest a little from the trip. In my room, I was relieved to find that everything was untouched. No one had touched my records, moved the furniture, or prepared it for conversion into an office. It was a good sign. Maybe Terence had really talked to Darla like he said he would. I unpacked my suitcase, took a shower and changed it into fresh clothes. Then I helped Rachel make dinner, just pasta with vegetable sauce. But after a week of delirious and frozen meals, the kids were thrilled to have a home-cooked meal. Darla came home around 8 after we had finished dinner and cleared the table. She entered the apartment looking like Simeon, who was carrying the weight of the world on her shoulders. Oh, Marlene. She nodded when she saw me. You're back. Yes, as promised. I smiled. How was your week? Fine, she hung her coat on the rack. Lots of work. New responsibilities take time. I understand. I nodded. Taran said, You're staying late every day. Yes. She headed for the kitchen. Without an office at home, I have to stay at work longer. A subtle hint that I chose to ignore. Can we talk? I asked all of us. I have some news. Darla turned around looking at me suspiciously. What news? Let's go to the living room, I suggested, so we don't have to repeat ourselves. She shrugged and followed me. Terence was already sitting there looking at something on his phone. Rachel and Oliver joined us, sitting next to each other on the couch. I remained standing, feeling that it was the right thing to do. I thought a lot during my vacation at Lauren's. I began about our situation, about how we've lived for the past 3 years, and about how I want to live from now on. Darla crossed her arms over her chest, clearly preparing to defend herself. Terence looked alarmed. And you've come to the conclusion that this can't go on, I said, taking the eviction notice out of my pocket. So, I've made a decision. I handed the envelope to Terence. He slowly opened it, read the contents, and his face turned white. What's that? Darla snatched the paper from his hands and quickly scanned the text. What is this nonsense? An eviction notice? Are you kidding? No, Darla. It shook my head. I've never been more serious. You can't evict us. She crumpled the paper. This is our home. No. I looked calmly into her eyes. This is my home. I've been paying the mortgage on it for 38 years. I let you in here 3 years ago out of compassion. But you've turned my hospitality into a right to boss me around. Darla looked as if she had been hit. We boss you around. She laughed, but there was no joy in her laughter. We take care of you. We feed you, clean up after you, do your laundry. No, Darla, I shook my head. I cook meals for the entire family. I key in the apartment. I do your laundry. And in return, you call me an old burden and try to evict me from my own bedroom. Darla opened her mouth to argue but couldn't think of a response. Mum, Terence finally found his voice. Let's discuss this. I'm sure we can work something out. Work something out, Terence. I looked at my son. I've been compromising for 3 years. I've given in on everything from the placement of the kitchen utensils to the TV viewing schedule. I kept quiet when Darla insulted me, rummaged through my things, and belittled my feelings. I put up with you gambling away your money instead of saving for a place of your own. I let you think this was your home even though mortgage payments were coming out of my account the whole time. Terence hung his head, acknowledging the truth of my words. And you know what's the saddest part? I continued. I did it out of love because you're my family. But I've recently realized that real love isn't letting others treat you like a doormat. Real love is setting healthy boundaries and demanding respect. And that's why you are kicking us out. Darla's voice was bitter. Your only son and grandchildren. I'm giving you 30 days to find another place to live, I replied. That's more than the law requires, and I'm willing to help with the first month's rent if you need it. How generous, Darla snorted. Have you thought about their children? They'll have to change schools, friends. Actually, I looked at Rachel and Oliver. I wanted to offer them to stay with me if they want to. There are rooms available, plenty of space. What? Darla jumped up. You want to split up our family? No, I shook my head. I'm offering them a choice. Rachel is 17. She'd be graduating from high school in a year. Oliver is 14. He's older now to make his own decisions. If they want to stay with you, I'll understand. If they want to stay here, our door is always open. Darla turned to the children. Did you hear that madness? She wants to destroy our family. Rachel exchanged glances with her brother. Mum, no one is destroying the family, she said quietly. Grandma just wants to be treated with respect. And I understand her. So you're on her side? Darla narrowed her eyes. After everything we've done for you, I'm not taking sides. Rachel straightened up. But you've seen how you've treated Bar all these years, and it's not right. Darla looked at Oliver. What about you? Are you going to betray your own parents too? Oliver, who had been silent until then, sighed. Mom, stop being so dramatic. No one is betraying anyone. Bar is her home, and you and Dad, you aren't very nice to her. Darla looked as if everyone she loved had betrayed her. She turned to Terence for support, but he was staring at the floor, clearly unwilling to get involved. Fine, Sheffnally said. Just fine. So that's how it's going to be. Well, Marlene, you're in. We'll move out like you want, but don't think we'll still be a family after that. We'll always be a family, I replied, but now on my terms with mutual respect and healthy boundaries. Darla snorted, grabbed her bag and stormed out of the apartment, slamming the door behind her. Terence sat there for a few more seconds, then sighed heavily and followed her as always, choosing the path of least resistance. The 3 of us remained, me and my grandchildren. There was a silence broken only by the ticking of the old clock on the wall. Grandma, Rachel finally said, "Are you sure you don't mind if we stay with you?" Of course not, I smiled. This is your home as much as it is mine, but it's your decision. They exchanged glances silently, communicating with each other. "I'll stay," Rachel said firmly. "At least until I finish school. Then we'll see." "Me too," Oliver nodded. "The internet's good for gaming her." I laughed, feeling genuine relief for the first time in a long time. Then it settled. "We'll manage together." They went to their rooms. Rachel to prepare for tomorrow's test. Oliver to return to his virtual battles. I remained in the living room, staring at the closed door behind which Terence and Darla had disappeared. I knew they would return to collect their things, talk to the children, perhaps try to change my mind. But I would not change my decision. Enough concessions, enough compromises at the expense of my own dignity. I walked over to the record shelf. In the living room, the very collection that Edward and I had spent a lifetime putting together, and that Darla wanted to throw away. I ran my fingers along spines, looking for a particular one. There it was, Miles Davis's Kind of Blue, Edward's favorite album. I carefully took the record out of its sleeve and placed it on the turntable. The soft, melancholic sounds of the trumpet filled the room. I closed my eyes, allowing the music to envelop me, to take me back to the days when Edward and I would sit here in the evenings, holding hands and dreaming of their future. "You would be proud of me," I said to him in my mind. I finally stood up for myself. I knew that the road ahead would not be easy. Terence might be offended. Darla would surely harbor resentment, and even my grandchildren might reconsider their decision to stay with me. But for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was in control of my life, that I wasn't a ghost in my own home, but its rightful owner. I opened my eyes and smiled as I looked at the familiar walls, their photographs on the mantelpiece, the cozy armchairs where we used to sit as a family. This house had seen so many stories, happy and sad, ordinary and extraordinary. And now a new chapter was beginning, my chapter. I turned up the volume a little and began to move to the beat of the music slowly, uncertainly at first, but gradually more freely. I hadn't danced in how long? 5 years. Not since Edward passed away. But my body remembered the movements, the rhythm, the feeling of freedom that the music gave me. I spun around the living room, letting the sounds of Miles Davis's trumpet lead me, just as Edward had once-led me in dance. And with every step, with every turn, I felt the weight of years of humiliation and self-denial fall from my shoulders. This was my home, my life, and I had finally regained the right to control it. When the record ended, I stopped in the middle of the room, feeling slightly out of breath and pleasantly tired. For the first time in a long time, I smiled thoughtlessly, without needing to hide my true feelings. Rachel was standing in the doorway, watching me with a tender smile. "You were dancing, Mom," she said. "I haven't seen you dance since, Grandpa." "Yes," I nodded. "It's time to remember how to do it." She came over and hugged me. "I'm glad you're back," she whispered. "The real you." I hugged her tightly in return, knowing what she meant. I really was back. Not just back to this apartment, but back to myself, to the Marlene Hendris who knew her worth and wasn't afraid to stand up for herself. And this Marlene wasn't going anywhere.